Hello students. Today we are still in chapter 9 looking at perfect competition. We learned earlier what perfect competition was. We also saw how firms maximize profit in the short run. Now we'll turn our attention to the long run. So a quick reminder of what perfect competition is. You have to have a lot of buyers and a lot of sellers. That ensures that no single firm and no single buyer has enough power to influence the price. Everyone's going to be a price taker. They can't change the market price. The market price is $7. You just got to accept that. You can't charge $8. You can't buy at a price of $6. You've got to go with what the market's telling you. So you have a lot of buyers and sellers. Everyone's a price taker. The products have to be similar. Now, a critical condition in the long run is you have to have free entry and exit. We said that free exit means that an old firm can leave the market costlessly. Free entry means that new firms can enter the market without paying any costs. So what this does in the long run is that it drives all economic profits to zero. That's different from the short run. In the short run, we saw several examples where economic profits could be positive or negative. Like we had back a couple of slides ago, back over here, economic profit was minus 290, so that profit was not zero because we were in the short run. So in the long run, the free entry and exit is what takes profits to zero. If a market is profitable, that's going to entice new firms to jump in. As new firms start coming in, that's going to take away profits from the firms that are already there. That's going to continue until profits eventually go to zero. If profits are negative, here's what's going to happen. In that case, some firms are losing money. That means that they're going to want to quit and leave the market. So if enough old firms leave, that makes things more profitable for the ones that survive. So old firms will keep leaving and leaving and leaving until eventually economic profits go back to zero. So you always get zero economic profit in the long run if you have perfect competition. That's a key idea. So we talked earlier about the short run and long run in terms of the firm's costs. So in the short run, we said a firm could have fixed costs. You still got to pay rent for your storefront even if you aren't producing anything. In the long run, though, that lease with your landlord expires and now you're no longer bound to keep doing that. So in the short run, you might have a loss where you're still paying rent and that you're not making enough money to cover your rent. In the long run, though, once your lease expires, they can just quit and you aren't losing money anymore. That's the idea for why profits could be negative in the short run, or could be positive in the short run too, but they'll always be zero in the long run. It's about those fixed costs and free entry and exit. So here's what this means on our graphs. So the blue line is ATC, that's average total costs. The gold line here is marginal cost. So we learned earlier, I said in chapter 8 that the marginal cost curve always meets the ATC curve when average total costs are minimized, so that'd be right over here. Now, this tells us something about what the firm will do in the long run. We know that price is the revenue the firm gets per unit. So if you sell something for $10, you get $10 per unit. ATC is the average total cost per unit. So if your revenue per unit is the same as your cost per unit, then you're making zero profits. So zero profit condition would mean price equals average total cost. Now, we said that if you have zero profits in the long run, and this means zero profits, then you have to have this condition be true in the long run. You have to have price equals average total cost. Now, the profit maximization rule that we had earlier still applies. You still have to have price equals marginal cost. So if you put it all together, we're saying if firms maximize profit, P equals MC, we're also saying that profit, when it's maximized, equals zero. Price equals ATC. So if you combine all that, you learn that price equals ATC, which equals marginal cost. So you have to have something like this. So here's ATC and there's marginal cost and they're intersecting, and that's also where price has to be. Now, to be clear, we're saying that economic profits go to zero. We learned earlier in chapter 8 that economic profits were not the same thing as accounting profits. Accounting profits is revenue minus your explicit costs. Explicit costs could be things like paying rent for your building or paying wages for your employees, stuff like that. Economic profit includes all that, but economic profit also includes opportunity cost. We had that example where Robert had to quit his old job where he was earning $70,000 per year in order to start a new business. So his new business got an accounting profit of $30,000. Actually, his economic profit was negative. So if your business gave you $30,000, but you could have earned $70,000 from your old job, that's a pretty big opportunity cost. Robert's assistant, Joseph, observed that Robert's economic profit was minus $40,000. He was $40,000 worse off than he would have been if he'd stuck to his old job and kept earning $70,000. So for the long run here, and the business is perfectly competitive, if Robert could have earned $70,000 from his old job, then his profit from this business would have to also be $70,000 in the long run. So you could get $70,000 from your old job versus $70,000 from your business. They're both equally good, so economic profit would be zero in that case. So you still earn an accounting profit and in the long run. So here's the conditions for when firms enter and exit the market in the long run. So here we have our average total cost here in blue, and we have the marginal costs in gold. In the short run, we also care about AVC, the average variable cost. I show that curve here in green. So our rule in the short run was that if price falls below average variable cost, then you want to temporarily shut down. You still have to pay your fixed costs, or you're still losing money in the short run if you shut down. However, that is the best way forward because that minimizes your losses. If price is somewhere down here, like a price of 10, and you try to keep producing, every time you produce, your profits go even lower. It's bad enough you have your fixed cost to pay. It's even worse, you're just going deeper and deeper into negative territory by making stuff that's not profitable. In the long run, though, your lease expires and you're not bound by those fixed costs anymore. So the new rule is that you want to leave the market when price falls below average total costs. So price is your revenue per unit, average total cost is your cost per unit. If price ever falls below your cost per unit, then your economic profits are negative, so that'd be a time to leave and do something else with your time instead. So you put all that together, you can piece the firm's supply curve together. So here you have average total cost in blue and marginal cost in gold, and you have the green line as average variable costs. We showed in the previous episode that the firm doesn't shut down, then its supply curve is the marginal cost curve. That's because our profit maximizing rule is price equals marginal cost. If price were up here at 90, you want to produce for a price of 90 equals marginal cost. That'd be right around here, so you produce about, looks like 10 units. If price were 60, you want to produce where marginal cost is 60, that'd be around here. It means making about 9 units. If you produce at this point, when you have price of 60, you produce at that point when price is 90. So where you supply is given by the marginal cost curve. Now once price falls below our sold cost, we're somewhere down here, that's when the firm is going to leave the market. When the firm leaves the market, they're suddenly producing 0. So supply curve suddenly jumps back over here for when the firm exits. But other than that, the firm is staying open, then supply is given by the marginal cost. So you can see there's this big jump over here. There's a discontinuity because of the firm's exit rule. So it's important to distinguish between fixed costs and sunk costs. A sunk cost is, according to your textbook, unrecoverable costs that have been incurred as a result of past decisions. So sunk costs are actually irrelevant to the firm's decision making. You've already committed to them. You can't change them no matter what you do. So you can't change them. There's no point in thinking about them or in worrying about them. So your book talks about one example. Should a sports team get rid of their old stadium and make a new one? So what would go into the decision to make that choice? You could think about, how much revenue do I get from the new stadium? I just got to think about, how much would it cost me to build that new stadium? Your book was obviously written back before COVID, when sports teams, you watch games in person and you go to stadiums. You also think about the cost of getting rid of your old stadium. It's not free to wreck a giant stadium like that. Now, one factor that should not be a part of your analysis was, how much did it cost us to build the old stadium? We've already paid for that. That's the past and we can't change it. So that shouldn't affect our decision either way. So you think about it like that, it seems pretty obvious that sunk costs should be irrelevant. However, in real life, sometimes people do think about sunk costs even when they shouldn't. Here's an example from an economist named Richard Thaler. He's a very famous economist, very accomplished. That's how he got the Nobel Prize in economics. He does some work in behavioral economics, and we'll talk about behavioral economics in the last chapter, chapter 17 in this course. What they did in one of his talks was he put together a lot of real-world examples where people sometimes don't follow what economic theory would predict. So here's one of his stories. My friend Jeffrey and I were given 2 tickets to a professional basketball game in Buffalo. On the day of the game, there was a snowstorm and we sensibly decided to skip the game. But Jeffrey, not an economist, said if we had paid the full price for those tickets, we would have gone. So what Jeffrey is doing here is what we call the sunk cost fallacy. Now let's say they had paid for those tickets. Well, if you already paid for those tickets and those tickets are not refundable, that's a sunk cost. You can't recover that cost. That is something you've already committed to, and you can't change it either way. So whether they pay for the tickets or not should have actually been irrelevant for their choice as to whether to go to the basketball game. If that's not clear, let me go show that another way. So here are some factors for both scenarios. If you stay home, you've paid for the ticket because you already paid for that in the past and you can't get your money back. If you go to the game, you've already paid for your ticket. You get the benefits from enjoying the game. So presumably they like basketball, that's why they pay for these tickets. You also face, though, the risk of traveling. So how do you make a decision? Well, you just gotta weigh costs and benefits. So if the benefit of the game minus the travel risk minus the cost of the ticket, so the benefits of going to the game is bigger than benefits of staying home, cost of the ticket, then you want to go to the game. Now, because you've already paid for this ticket, you've already committed to that in the past, that's why it's a cost for both if you go to the game, and it's still a cost even if you stay home because you already paid it. So those costs just cancel out. Those sunk costs go away, and all it really boils down to is the benefit of the game bigger than the travel risk. The cost of the ticket should not be a part of that decision because that affects you whether you go to the game or whether you stay home. You've already paid that money. So that's how you can see that the sunk cost really shouldn't matter, logically. So that's how sunk costs work. It's something to watch out for in business, but also something to be aware of in your personal life. That wraps up this episode. In our next episode, we'll look at the market supply curve. So how do you combine the firm's individual supply curves to get the market or aggregate supply curve?